Sila on the level of Dhamma and Sila on the level of Vinaya. Broadly speaking, there are two levels of morality, Sila. First is the universal level, or the level of absolute truth, Dhamma. This includes teachings or principles of conduct that are taught, de sita, to show how people who perform good or bad actions, or who observe or violate immoral precepts, will receive the fruits of these good and bad actions automatically and in accord with cause and effect, or in accord with the law of karma. Second is the conventional level, which refers to a specific code of ethics, Vinaya, containing rules and regulations that have been laid down and prescribed, panyata. These formal codes are used to govern and direct individuals in a particular community or group, conforming to the group's aims and objectives. A person who transgresses these rules, defined by a specific code of ethics, is accountable to the authority of that particular group, and his or her transgression is distinct from the negative consequences of unwholesome intention that inevitably follow according to the natural law of karma. From the perspective of the entire human race, people live under different conditions according to time and place. People are subject to varying social, economic, and political circumstances, determined by the localities and time periods in which they live. It is impossible to lay down a detailed, strictly defined, and authoritative ethical code that will be constructive and advantageous to people in every time period and social environment. For the universal human community, Buddhism teaches or recommends the group of factors most often referred to as the five precepts, Panchasila, as the most basic moral code, or as the minimum level of moral behaviour. Beyond these, there are the moral precepts contained in the 10 wholesome courses of action, Kusala Kamapata, specifically the first 7 of the 10 factors, and the moral component of the Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, which are comprehensive moral precepts. The Buddha presented these moral principles as aspects of absolute truth. The person who observes these or fails to observe them will receive good or bad results according to the laws of nature. If a person decides to follow the teaching of the Buddha, he or she adopts these moral principles as conditions for spiritual practice. In other words, the Buddhist teachings stipulate that one must accept as a minimum level of practice the acknowledgement and acceptance of the five precepts. As mentioned above, the five precepts were also referred to as the five Sikkhapada, the five observances, or the five rules of training. This is the basic level of practice for Buddhist male and female lay disciples, but of course they may wish to adopt a more refined level of moral training. For example, by keeping the 8 precepts on the observance days. The Dhamma exists on the levels of virtuous conduct, Sila, concentration, Samadhi, and wisdom, Panya. Moral discipline, Vinaya, is limited to the first level of virtuous conduct. Concentration and wisdom are classified exclusively as aspects of Dhamma. In some, virtuous conduct exists on both the level of Dhamma and the level of Vinaya. Let us explore this twofold division of Sila. 1. Moral conduct as Dhamma. This refers to those principles of behavior pertaining to moral conduct, to physical actions, speech, and livelihood, that are taught in connection to an ideal and natural state of human conduct. By acting in conformity with these principles, or by violating them, one reaps good or bad results directly, being accountable to natural laws. A related definition for Sila here is moral conduct and moral discipline that becomes one's regular and normal way of behavior, or that becomes a personal attribute. 2. Moral conduct as Vinaya, a set of rules and regulations formulated as a social legislation for directing people's behavior in accord with the specific aims of a community or society. This system of management and supervision also includes means of punishing those who transgress these rules. This punishment is separate from the repercussions occurring as a consequence of the laws of nature. Strictly speaking, Vinaya is not yet Sila, but is rather linked to Sila. It refers to a social system and procedure for establishing people in moral conduct. It is a way of training people in virtue. Sila is aided by Vinaya, but as it is an aspect of absolute truth, Dhamma, it is not identical to Vinaya. The way to distinguish between these two is that Dhamma is a matter of absolute natural conditions, whereas moral discipline is dependent on a specific human society or on the ingenuity of human beings. Having made this distinction, one can discuss the term Sila in a broad and flexible fashion as various stages or aspects as follows. Sila refers to virtuous behavior in relation to other people and to one's surroundings. This behavior generates blessings for oneself and for others, including one's society and natural environment. Sila refers to moral code laid down to foster a well-ordered, peaceful society whose members can live their lives at ease. Sila refers to a means for governing people's behavior, leading to disciplined and impeccable physical and verbal conduct. Sila refers to a collection of training rules used for eliminating coarse defilements that manifest by way of body or speech, and for leading to greater spiritual refinement. Sila refers to a set of rules for developing a person's physical actions, speech, and livelihood in order to create a foundation for cultivating and empowering the mind on the level of concentration, samadhi, and for increasing the mind's capabilities. Sila refers to the natural state of physical action, speech, and livelihood of a virtuous person. A person who has been well trained, who has gained true knowledge, and who has reached an exalted spiritual realization. The heart of moral conduct lies with intention, to be free from any thoughts of moral transgression. One aspect of moral transgression is to violate rules, regulations, precepts, and codes of discipline that have been specifically laid down. Another aspect of moral transgression is the violation of other people, the intention to harm others. Sila can thus be interpreted in two ways: the intention to transgress an ethical code, or the intention to violate or oppress other people. Put simply, the term Sila means non-transgression and non-harming. Viewed from another angle, Sila refers to self-control and vigilance, the refraining from and prevention from evil actions. And in the most profound sense, Sila can be defined as the state of mind of a person who is free from all thoughts of transgression and all thoughts of maltreatment. The general rules of training, Sikapada, in Buddhism are the link between morality on the level of Dhamma and morality on the level of discipline. Because these rules are based on universal moral principles and compiled as moral code, Vinaya, nevertheless, Buddhism does not establish a single ethical code that all people must invariably observe. An ethical code is a matter for members of a specific community to formulate by consensus as is suited to their circumstances and objectives, by choosing from various moral principles and then to adhere to this code. For example, the commentators formulated the householder's discipline at Vinaya based on abstaining from the 10 unwholesome courses of action. Similarly, they formulated the layman's discipline, Gihi Vinaya, based on the Buddha's teachings on conduct found in the Singalaka Sutta. For example, to abstain from the four biases, agati, to not indulge in the 6 paths to ruin, apayamukha, and to uphold a proper relationship to the 6 directions. Here is a review of the 5 precepts and the 10 wholesome courses of action. 5 precepts. 1. To abstain from killing living creatures, panatipata. 2. To abstain from taking what is not freely given, dinadana. 3. To abstain from sexual misconduct, kamesu michachara. 4. To abstain from speaking falsehoods, musawada. 5. To abstain from spirits, liquor, and intoxicants, which are a basis for heedlessness, shutra me raya maja pamadatana. 10 wholesome courses of action. 1. To abstain from killing living creatures, panatipata vairamani. 2. To abstain from taking what is not freely given, dinadana vairamani. 3. To abstain from sexual misconduct, kamesu michachara vairamani. 4. To abstain from false speech, musawada vairamani. 5. To abstain from divisive speech, Vinaya vachaya veramani. 6. To abstain from harsh speech, Parusa vachaya veramani. 7. To abstain from idle chatter, Sampapalapa veramani. 8. Non-covetousness, Anabhija. 9. Non-ill will, Abhyapada. And 10. Right views, Samadhiti. In the older Pali texts, when referring to the general moral conduct of people, the Buddha uses the term 5 virtues, Panchadhamma, for the 5 precepts. In reference to rules of training for lay Buddhists, to rules of conduct for lay noble disciples, the term 5 rules of training, Panchasikhapada, is used. The term 5 precepts, Panchasila, occurs once in the Vinaya Pitaka and occasionally in verse passages in the secondary texts of the Tipitaka. In the commentaries it is frequently used. The following question may be posed between the 5 precepts and the 10 wholesome courses of action, which should be given more emphasis in teaching. Alternatively, if one begins by teaching the 5 precepts, when should one include the teaching of the 10 wholesome courses of action? This will be discussed below, but if one examines the contents of the Tipitaka, there are more passages related to the 10 wholesome courses of action than to the 5 precepts. The Bhikkhu Code of Discipline and its relationship to society. What has been mentioned above refers primarily to ethics, as it concerns the lay community. For the community of monks, Bhikkhu Sangha, the system of moral training can be laid down in a much more explicit way, because the Buddha established this community himself according to predetermined principles and objectives, i.e. to support a practice that is most conducive for reaching the highest goal of Buddhism, and to spread the goodness that results from this practice far and wide, for the welfare and happiness of all inhabitants of the world. The Buddha formulated a system of rules and regulations to help guide the life and behavior of the bhikkhus in order to give rise to positive results according to these principles and objectives. The members of this community, those individuals who are ordained as monks, enter voluntarily, and thus they all accept the practice according to these rules. This moral code is the Vinaya of the Bhikkhu Sangha. The Vinaya is composed of numerous training rules, including rules on how monks should behave while alone, how they should behave amongst each other, how they should behave in relation to other people, example the lay community, how they should behave in relation to nature and their environment, and how they should govern their community and conduct communal affairs. A similar code of discipline was laid down for the nuns community, the Bhikkhuni Vinaya. Those candidates who, for some reason, are not fully prepared for higher ordination may be accepted as novices. Having limited status and privileges in the monastic community, Buddha laid down 10 training rules for novices, which are included in the Vinaya. Virtuous conduct, Sila, in this context is the state of well-being or the wholesome behaviour that stems from not transgressing the training rules contained in the Vinaya. This is morality, Sila, on the level of formal discipline, Vinaya. There are two aspects to keeping moral precepts or to practicing according to moral principles. Self-discipline, in order to develop virtuous qualities, and a consideration of the benefits to others or to society. The former aspect is obvious throughout the Buddha's teachings, the suttas, while the latter aspect is strongly emphasized in the monk's discipline, the Vinaya. In relation to society, in the case that a monk's actions were unskillful and warranted the enactment of a training rule, the Buddha would call the community of monks together, verify the truth from the instigator, and explain the harm of such an action. That it does not generate faith in the faithless, nor does it increase faith in the faithful, but rather it prevents faith from arising in those without faith, and it shakes the confidence of some of the faithful. Only then did he lay down the new training rule and describe its advantages. The concern here over people's faith is a concern for the well-being and happiness of the greater public. The well-being of society affects the well-being of both the monastic community and of Buddhism as a whole, because the stability of the monastic community and of the Buddhist religion is dependent on the faith of the laity. The faith of lay Buddhists stems from pasada, confidence, inspiration, joy, ease of heart, and a delight and enthusiasm for goodness. This quality is conducive to happiness, supports concentration, and is favourable to wisdom, providing people with the necessary strength of heart to understand a subject under investigation. This joy and confidence is a fundamental source of well-being, enabling people to progress in mental and wisdom development. Before offering a teaching on the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha would gradually prepare the listener's state of mind and degree of understanding until the person's mind was at ease, malleable, free from the hindrances, delighted and bright. A monk should behave virtuously, not to seek personal gain from the resulting devotion of the lay supporters, which would be reprehensible, but rather for the well-being and happiness of the monastic community, as well as the wider lay community. Unawakened monks must practice both aspects of moral behaviour, combining assistance to others with self-discipline and self-training. Arahants, on the other hand, who are completely free from mental defilement and whose personal moral duties are thoroughly accomplished, keep moral principles or abide by a moral code purely for the well-being of the monastic community and of all human beings. This is consistent with the vital principle vis-a-vis the conduct and activity by the Buddha and his disciples, to practice for the welfare and happiness of the many folk out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare and happiness of gods and humans, as well as the principle of being considerate of later generations, for setting a good example and of promoting goodness in the world by honouring the Dhamma and the Vinaya. For this reason, awakened persons observe moral precepts strictly. It is not in their nature to claim that they are free from defilement, carefree and detached, and therefore do not need to keep particular training rules and can act in any manner they please. Arahants do not only keep moral precepts, but some also uphold numerous observances, vata, associated with specific ascetic practices, Tutanga vata, which are not required by the Vinaya, in order to abide happily in the present and to assist later generations by acting as a good example. When one investigates the mental fetter of adherence to rules and religious practices, Sila Bhatta Paramasa, one should not overlook a person's reasons and intentions that are connected to virtue and to benefiting the community. If a person observes moral precepts, duties, customs, and traditional ceremonies with an understanding and an intention of acting in a well-mannered and exemplary fashion, this action helps unite a community and elevates the Dhamma. If a person acts appropriate to the circumstances in accord with good intentions and not in a disingenuous way, one should not be in a hurry to criticize this behavior. Where the behavior in regard to rules, observances, customs, ceremonies, and moral codes is incorrect, is by holding to them in a gullible way and simply imitating others without recognizing their purpose, to the point that one mistakenly believes that purity, or the final spiritual goal, is reached by simply keeping precepts or observing customs and traditions. Such behavior leads to a distortion of these precepts and practices, deviating from the Buddhist path. Similarly, people may uphold moral precepts and religious practices with concealed craving and fixed views. By seeking a reward of material gain, fame, praise, delight, or rebirth in heaven, and by reinforcing a sense of self-identity until the true purpose of moral conduct is obscured, and the way to reaching the goal of Dhamma practice is obstructed. Or people may keep moral precepts and follow various observances, customs, and ceremonies in an unworthy, corrupt way. They get carried away and overly impressed by their own good deeds, which become a source of pride and conceit. A person who keeps moral precepts and follows the Vinaya should understand the objectives, the intended benefits of the Vinaya, which the Buddha stated each time that he laid down a training rule. There are 10 such benefits pertaining to communal well-being. 1. For the goodness that comes from a harmonious Sangha. 2. For the well-being of the Sangha. 3. For the control of shameless individuals. B. Pertaining to individual well-being. 4. For the comfort of virtuous bhikkhus. C. Pertaining to growth in the Dhamma. 5. For the prevention of danger and trouble in the present. 6. For the prevention of danger and trouble in the future. D. Pertaining to social well-being. 7. To arouse faith in those who lack faith. 8. To increase faith in the faithful. E. Pertaining to the well-being of Buddhism. 9. For the stability of the true Dhamma. tend to promote discipline and to support the Vinaya. Yet the Anguttara Nikaya contains another list of objectives for the establishment of the training rules, which includes the following two factors. One, for the benefit of the lay followers. Two, to sever relations with those factions of bhikkhus who are evilly disposed. The objectives reveal an emphasis on communal welfare and happiness. Similarly, the rules in the Vinaya dealing with the implementation of formal acts by the community, Sangha Kama, attest to the importance given to community affairs. By focusing on the cooperation and concerted efforts of the monks, formal acts of the Sangha only proceed well, however, if the community is in harmony and undivided. This is a principal reason why the Buddha reiterated the significance of Sangha harmony, as opposed to Sangha discord, by stating that the arising of harmony in the Sangha is conducive to the welfare and happiness of all people, whereas schisms in the Sangha have the opposite effect. Various rules and regulations laid down by the Buddha in the Vinaya express a spirit of communal well-being and dignity which is applicable to all human relationships. An example of which is the common practice of monks paying respects to one another.